This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The champion, welcome, Danny Batten.
Hey guys, I'm Sai and welcome to the Danny Batten Fight Show here on A.C.E Podcast Nation. This is episode number 108. We are back after a week off, but we are just going to have a good old chat about MMA and boxing this evening. No guests, a slightly shorter show just to ease us in, as it were. We are live on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter as always. And as you know, A.C.E Podcast Nation, you're home to many a great show and series featuring top guests, expert analysts and more. And this week is exactly like that. We got this tonight. We got some shows on Patreon. Wednesday, we got a new episode of My Story where I was joined by Darren Pearce, former Premier League defender, for a chat in the studio, which was good. That's coming out later this week. Rodri Gigs on Football is out. And of course, the Patreon shows, patreon.com/A.C.E Podcast Nation. If you want to get some extra exclusive content, including the Boot and the Limp, our adult comedy podcast, which is always a good time to say the least. But joining me as ever is former Cage Warriors champion and UK MMA legend, Mr. Danny Batten. How are you, my friend?
Yes, I'm good, Si. I treated myself to a weekend of camping this weekend, so it's been a bit different already this weekend.
Indeed, mate. Yeah, it's been an interesting week, I've got to say. It's been a bit all over the place. COVID hit me hard, and I had a show scheduled for last Friday, and it was literally like it was Joe Jacobson, former footballer, or a current footballer, should I say? Sorry. We were all set. It was like 20 minutes before he's at his hotel because he's playing on the Saturday. And I texted him and said, "Oh, mate, I all of a sudden feel really rough." And then that was it. Like by the sort of 10 o'clock in the night, I was really, really ill. And then I said to my missus, I just said, because I was still testing negative on the lateral flow ones. So I said to my missus, I said, "Look, I think we need to get a PCR," because she was rough as well. And two of my boys had it. So it was like, right, okay. So we got a PCR the next morning and they came back in like 15 hours or something, both positive. So we were just like, right, okay. And I got to say, from Friday through to probably Tuesday morning, like the weekend, I barely remember. It was like, it took me back to my days of like in my youth of doing drugs and stuff and not remembering. Like I couldn't remember anything really from the weekend. I felt horrible. Wouldn't wish it on anyone, but you know, it is what it is. I feel a lot better now, almost back to fighting fit, I'd say. But I am looking forward to having a chat, mate, because there's loads of stuff to talk about. So we're going to kind of focus on MMA and that side of things for the first 40 minutes or so. And then Ben's going to join us for half hour to talk about the boxing. But obviously last week, had some interesting stories. We had a really good heavyweight fight. Not going to go through the card as a whole, but Francis Ngannou obviously beat Gane, as I predicted, by the way. Just saying. But it was, I don't think it was how many people thought he was going to win. I think people thought it was either going to be him by a knockout fairly early, or if it went the distance, people seemed to be leaning towards Gane. But I did say, I think on the last show we did, when we were talking about it, that people really are underestimating for how much Francis Ngannou had improved his all-round game. He's not just this guy. He's not like a guy of 20 years ago who is only good at striking. And I felt like in some quarters, not from us, but like in some sections of the media, particularly, and ex-fighters, people were almost writing him off as like a guy from 10, 15 years ago, one of the, who was good at striking, but couldn't do anything else. And I think he'd shown, since he lost that fight a couple of years ago, he's shown improvements with every fight. And I thought he was excellent. UFC is obviously left with a bit of a quandary now because he's out of contract, but he's the heavyweight champion of the world. What did you think of his performance overall, Dan?
Yeah, good. The rounds, the first two rounds kind of went the way I was expecting them to go. In that Cyril was, throwing more of the strikes, landing more of the strikes, just outworking him, and having to stay out of the realm of overtraining, where Ngannou can obviously land those power bombs. Ngannou, I think it was never necessarily their strategy or their tactic to out wrestle Gane, but I just think that it happened in that round three, and I think they just realised that perhaps that was the way to go, and they started stealing back the rounds. For me, it was all on that fifth round, and Gane took control by getting and initiating the takedown himself in that fifth round, but went for an absolutely crazy idea of going back for a leg lock on Ngannou. Now, would I still be saying that if he pulled off the win and heel hooked Ngannou? Yes, I would still be saying that, because it's just not a clever idea. He put the effort into getting Ngannou down on his back, for which Ngannou was putting him on his back for the last couple of rounds leading up to that fifth round, and could have just mauled his way to victory. I think it would have been 3-2 had he won that fifth round, but no, he set back for a leg lock that just wasn't there. He wasn't even setting it up entirely correctly, and gave away top position to Ngannou, and that's just not a good thing to be doing in the fifth round with such a big, powerful guy that's clearly done well in the previous two rounds, being on top, being that he out-wrestled Gane and the previous two. So I was left a little baffled and bewildered. Maybe it was a bit of the exertion getting to him, and he tried to sit back for that leg lock, hoping to, put all that physical energy to an end. It must have been a grueling match for him. But I don't know. I was just left bewildered by it. I think he had control. I think he could have won it. And that one decision, for my mind, is what threw the fight away for him.
Yeah, it was puzzling.
I just want to say, though, you're absolutely right. And people, I think, were thinking Ngannou was going to just get the knockout on the feet. I think we're so often seeing his power come to play. And it just wasn't that way. I think Ngannou's really improved his wrestling skills. Very, very good, and being that he's such a powerful guy as well, such an athletically gifted guy, I'm not surprised that he can wrestle some now. I was maybe a little surprised that once he started to realise he could get Gane down, that he was able to do it time and time again. I think maybe even that was a shock for Gane. So yeah, it was impressive. He's becoming more of a complete athlete. I do always maintain, I think that an issue he could potentially have is that he can just get outworked if they can stay away from now, not just his powerful hands, but also his takedowns that he's brought into his game with great effect. I think if you can get someone that can be similar to Gane, and that he could just outwork him and stay away now from that power and those takedowns, this could be still a ways to beating someone like Ngannou. But easier said than done, because Gane couldn't find a way around it, could he? Gane couldn't find a way around it, could he, in the end?
No, and I think it's set up this weird situation where, Francis Ngannou's the UFC heavyweight champion, but as out of contract. They also was revealed that the UFC had sent him a letter threatening a lawsuit if he discussed boxing with anyone. And this apparently got that like right before the fight as well, because there'd been talk that he'd been in talks to do a heavyweight boxing fight. And what makes it even more remarkable out of all that is Francis Ngannou tore his ACL. I think it was ACL or his MCL before the fight. So what he did, and again, I think this is clever, because he had to wear a knee support because his knee was all jacked up. Instead of just wearing one and it becomes a target, he wore two. I know it's only a little thing, but if he had worn just one knee support, and Gane can kind of maybe see that as maybe he's got an issue with his knee, target it, low kicks, things like that. But by wearing the two, I think it subconsciously, you think, he's just, he's been training hard or whatever. So I thought that, but to put on a 5-round performance in a way which is not your natural game, with a jacked up knee like that, I think speaks for itself as well. Will he go and get paid and do boxing? I wouldn't blame him, mate. I've got to be honest. It feels a little bit like maybe he's been a bit disrespected in some quarters in terms of his value to the company, and they don't seem to treat him perhaps as a bigger deal as he should be. I don't know whether that's fair, but it'll be interesting now, because obviously he's in a situation whereby he's out of contract. They don't want their champion to really go anywhere without dropping it, do they? Let's be honest. They can kind of, I'm sure they can get around it, and they can, he can vacate it or whatever. But ultimately, he'll still be the kind of lineal current holding UFC champion, won't he? And I think it makes it problematic for the UFC, really. But it is what it is. I think,
unusual.
I think
unusual situation.
Yeah, I think either way he'll defend it. Even if he just signs a 1-fight deal or like a rolling thing, I'd be very, very surprised if he goes without doing something with the title, because I think the majority of fighters have got like a bit of respect for the world title and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'd be very surprised if they would kind of like vacate it as such.
Yeah.
But I guess it is what it is, I suppose. We got UFC London coming up, which I really can't wait to have a really good delve into. Any of those fights like straight away from the UFC London card stick out for you as exciting, or is it more like just general excitement?
The whole thing, the whole thing's going to be of interest, isn't it? It's in London. That gives you a sense that things are kind of getting back to how we have known them. Having a UFC over this way is just such a great thing. And just having the whole aspect of it being here, along with having some great British athletes on the card, it's just fantastic. I think it's going to drum up so much motivation for fans and great motivation for the fighters that are competing on there, of course, and also the hopes for other fighters that are going to want to get onto future London cards. I think it's going to real stir up some excitement.
Oh, the card's insane, mate. I saw they announced another fight today.
One that I'm watching out for, Aspinall. I'm really looking out for him specifically because I think he's going to be doing some future big things.
Yeah, I got to be. I'd be lying if I didn't say like the Jack Shaw fight is massive.
Of course,
as a Welshman, but also they've announced. So we got obviously Volkov versus Tom Aspinall in the heavyweight division, first and foremost. Tom Aspinall has been very vocal about being patient and building himself up.
Yes. Yeah.
However, the heavyweight division is such, it's not as deep as the other divisions. So when you do what he's done and smash up a couple of guys in a row, it kind of just automatically puts you into this thing where, right, you got to fight someone big now, and if you beat them, you're probably going to be in the title picture, just because the division is not as deep as the bantamweight or the lightweight and all the the light heavyweight. They're so deep, those divisions.
Yeah.
that, like you look at Leon Edwards and Arnold Allen and people like this in the featherweight division, who probably, if the division was a little bit thinner, would have had a title shot a while ago because of they're on such good runs. But let's start with Aspinall. He's fighting Alexander Volkov. It is a big step up. Like, Aspinall's ranked 10th. Volkov's obviously vastly experienced, ranked 5. It's a big step up in quality of opponent, but do you think Aspinall has shown enough that so far from you?
Yeah. I mean, Volkov's kind of one-dimensional in many ways. You know, we could kind of I think we all agree with that. And so I think the sort of game plan going in is simplified somewhat. You know, there's weaknesses to sort of like probe and aim at. I think he's fully capable actually in all the arenas of potentiality for MMA, to be honest, Aspinall. I think he's capable of doing it all. Yes, he is inexperienced, which is something he's admitted to himself, but I think he's just playing a little possum. I think he's ready to take on anyone in that division, largely because, it is a little thinner, perhaps, than some of the other divisions in overall skill set. But, you know, with the heavyweights, as we know, there's just nothing that you can easily predict, because it could go pear-shaped very wrong for any of those guys, because they all hit and bang so hard. But, I'm still going to push my money towards Aspinall to win that one, although he is giving away somewhat on experience.
Yeah, and I think my one, like at the back of my mind with Tom is he hasn't really been tested, like in terms of going deep and maybe, you know, some of his other skill sets, but that's not his fault either. Like, he's just been too good for his opponents, and that's meant that he hasn't really had to be tested. And ultimately, yes, Volkov, very, very experienced fighter, very, very good fighter over the years, but I don't think he's what he was, you know, 5-10 years ago. So I am excited for it. And let's not forget, you know, Aspinall has beaten, who has he beaten? He's beaten Arlovsky, Arlovsky in under a minute of the second round by submission. Yeah. He beat Bordeaux by KO, and he beat Spivak via KO. So even though the 2 KOs came pretty quick, he did get, you know, a minute or two into the second round. So I think, you know, that's interesting. It's exciting to see these British guys. And then obviously going on from that, then we've also got the co-main event, Paddy Pimblett, former guest a couple of times actually. It's already made a lot of money and a lot of a shout for it. He's made a splash in the UFC, and he's only had one fight. There was rumors of him fighting Cowboy Cerrone. That didn't come to fruition. He's fighting Carzola Vargas, which I think is a better fight for where Paddy's at. Like, I was concerned. Not that I think he would beat Cowboy, but I just think that's a massive fight to have second fight in.
Yeah, I agree.
Whereas this one, I think he beats Carzola Vargas, and then he can go on and get a bit of a run together. But I'm excited to see him. And we all know, like, when Paddy's got the fans, which it's going to be insane, because you could have Paddy brings thousands with him. You have Jack Shaw brings thousands with him. Arnold Allen has done a lot of his fighting in America. So a lot of people of his fans are going to be there. It's exciting. But with Paddy in that lightweight bout, do you see Carzola Vargas causing him too many issues?
Yeah, I mean, he's got the skills, hasn't he, to cause problems potentially. Let's just say that. But I'd say Paddy's got more dangerous skill sets to cause him more so problems. It's still always down to the fact that, you know, he did show a little bit of nerves in that previous fight. I think if he had shaken those off and he don't let the occasion get to him, because I think Paddy Pimblett's now got a different type of pressure on him now that he has suddenly got all these lights shining upon him in a very, very real way. You know, could this add some nerves into the expectance of a performance from him? I don't know. I think that's going to all come to fruition very, very quickly with this fight. I think once he gets this fight out of the way, albeit that we hope that he wins it, I think he's going to become more and more of more of an experienced competitor compared to the others in UFC. Although we know Paddy's been around for a long, long time, this is nevertheless a step up. And I really liked. Do you remember when we had him on? I really liked how we had spoke to him. We covered the fact that this kid at a very, very young age got offered the chance to go to UFC, and turned it down, and rightly so, I think, at that stage in his life. But now look, go forward a few more years, still very, very young, to be going into UFC, but more experienced. And I don't know, I've got good feelings about him. And the only other concern I perhaps have is just whether he's going to make corrections, or whether his camp has made corrections with some of his striking. Don't get me wrong, some of his striking is quite intense, but I do think there's some structural holes there in terms of his defense. But again, could we put that down to that got showed up a little bit in that first fight just because there's a bit of tentative nerves? I don't know, but I think seeing him come out again into UFC, I think perhaps we'll see where we're at with him regards on how they deal with things that they've seen that are potential vulnerabilities that were in his game. I'm just really excited. Look, every time he fights, it's exciting, right? It's exciting. He brings a lot of hype, a lot of tensions cast upon him. He talks the talk. It's going to be good. It's good for the sport.
And I think the nerves. I do believe we'll see a slightly different Paddy this time. I think his nerves will be gone. I think he's always going to have that nervous energy because he's the way he is. But the actual nerves, it's not something you generally associate with him. He's quite clinical and prolific in his performances. If you watch all his Cage Warriors fights, yes, he comes in, he's frenetic, he's energetic, and all that. But it's interesting. So it's going to be. I can't wait. Then you got Arnold Allen, who obviously we had on the show a couple of weeks ago. He's fighting Dan Hooker. That's a massive, massive fight for Arnold Allen. Like, to me, if he was impressive in that, Arnold, and he beats him comfortably or in an impressive way or impressive performance, he's in the title picture straight away for me, because Dan Hooker's one of those guys where he's been right at the top. He'll stand and bang. He'll fight anyone. So if you come out with an impressive victory in whatever fashion, it is what it is. And what do you think about Arnold's chances versus Dan Hooker? I think it's a very difficult fight for him.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity. Dan Hooker could be potentially very problematic for most fighters if they don't deal with his unusual footwork choices. He kind of fights on the outskirts a lot, although we have seen him stand the ground more in his last performance. I just feel that Arnold Allen's just got that skill set of range and wrestling that's maybe going to be a little bit too much for Dan Hooker. But this is one of those fights it'd be very, very hard to confidently put your money either or way. But of course, naturally, my feelings and my heart go with Arnold Allen. But not just because of my heart, but my head even tells me it, because I think he's flowing under the radar because he's quite a quiet character. He's not someone that talks big. I think he's very, very confident behind the scenes, although he's not overly vocal about that. I think he's very, very confident with himself. I just think he's going to be too much for Dan Hooker because he's going to layer in his range better. Dan Hooker's got to kind of play a little bit more elusive. I just think Arnold Allen's going to be too good at pushing the range on the feet in a way that's going to open up his takedown opportunities. And I think he could end up smothering the rounds out of Dan Hooker and could always put the fight away at any particular time. That's how I see it, really. I just think it'll be Arnold Allen pushing the pace all the time, just gently pressuring and crushing Hooker backwards. At least that's what I think he should be doing to try to squeeze out a win here.
So we've got about 10 minutes before Ben comes in. There's so many fighters on this card, but I do want to give them all a good sort of talk about the British guys, because there's so many really good fighters there. So I'm going to ignore the fights which haven't got British guys, I'm afraid, for a minute. We'll preview it closer anyway. Nikita Krylov versus Paul Craig has been announced over the last sort of day or so. That is a fight which really, really appeals to me. As you know, I really like Nikita Krylov. Paul Craig has been outstanding.
Really has. Yep.
So, like, that fight for me, from a personal point of view, that's almost like up there as a co-main event for me. I'm so excited by that fight in the light heavyweight division. But like, it's a big step up again for Paul Craig as well. I think
it is.
Like,
it is.
He's been impressive, but I'm just gonna have a quick look at who he's fought in recent times. But like, what do you see Krylov being some of the problems he might cause Paul Craig?
I think Paul Craig's submissions are so potentially dangerous. You know, I think that's where he's going to cause some chaos, which goes in his favour. I just think that's where it's going to be at. I think if he wants to win this, it's just a case: can he get it there with enough energy to cause that chaos, and can he get it there at all? That's going to be the question. He has to find a way to get down there with some energy to create those transitions that give him so many opportunities to potentially put it away, and he's showing that recently. So fingers crossed for him. I really want Paul Craig to win this, because it really puts the limelight on him, and I think he's been in a sport and served his dues to really have some proper attention around him.
Yeah, he's worked his way up really well through that division. This is a bit, like I said, it's a big fight, and it's going to be fascinating to see. But then it's a big fight for Nikita Krylov. There's only Krylov is 9th ranked and Paul Craig is 11th. So like, a victory for either guy is going to really push them into that sort of top 6, 7 and looking at titles. So it's going to be interesting. You've got the debut of the recently signed flyweight Mohamed Makhachev fighting Corey Durden, which I think that's a really interesting fight straight out of the bat for Makhachev, because he's coming in with a big reputation, and Corey Durden, whilst he's not like up there with the the best in the flyweight division, but he's not an easy first fight in, I don't think.
I pretty much agree with that. But still an interesting matchup nevertheless. I think that's what this card is all about, the curiosity of how this is all going to play out. I think the matchmaking's been done very, very well for this, as it so often is, but there's certainly no disappointing matchups with this, the whole card, to be honest. I think all of them have an avid interest of curiosity of how it's going to play out.
What's interesting with it as well is, like, they've been quite clever, the UFC. They've put up some of these big fights, but if they get quite a high percentage of those British fighters winning those fights, number one, it will create a massive buzz over Europe and the UFC in Europe and stuff like that. But also, they could end up with like 4 or 5 genuine superstars ready to make the next step. Tom Aspinall, Jack Shaw, Makhachev making his debut. You've got Paul Craig will be right up there. You've got Arnold Allen would be right in with a shout. You'd have Paddy Pimblett on what people will be asking, he needs a big fight. So it's fascinating the way they've set it up. Molly McCann's fighting Luana Carolina. Obviously, Molly had a tough period. She came through it. She looked really, really impressive in her last fight. I think she was unlucky in a couple of her fights as well. So I think Molly, I saw a few people before saying if she hadn't won her last fight, there was a bit of pressure on her. I actually didn't think that there was that much pressure on her, because I thought actually a couple of the fights which she'd lost were really close. Like, my memory's not the best, but I'm sure one of them was close and was on points, and then another one was close, and I think she made a mistake and got punished for it. But she was very impressive in her last fight, and she's game. She will stand and she will fight in that division. So it's going to be interesting, because they need new women's stars. They need, especially in that flyweight division, they're looking for someone to really step into that top 15. And I think both these girls with an impressive performance are going to be set up nicely to maybe go into the top 15. So
Yeah,
be watching that one with interest.
absolutely. Yeah, of course.
Jack Shaw, mate, is fighting Timur Valiev. Was due to fight Nurmagomedov.
Yeah.
Didn't happen again for whatever reason. But look, I don't think it's any secret how highly we rate Jack Shaw. So it's going to be interesting because this is going to be his first UFC fight on home soil.
Yeah.
I think it might be correct in saying it's his first fight in front of fans for probably about 2 years. So, and that might, that's probably the same for a lot of these British guys. Like,
yeah,
because the UFC cards they've been on have been those kind of behind closed doors ones. I don't think they've been on any of the big pay-per-view cards where they've had fans there. So it's going to be massive. Do you see anything but a Jack Shaw victory in that one?
Yeah, I mean, come on, we've really not even seen it get tested yet, which is crazy when you think that he's stepped up into UFC. But he really has done incredibly well. I mean, he just seems to make good decisions throughout each match. Yeah, I don't want to say faultless. I don't want to over amp him, but let's look at the performances. They're incredible. They really have been incredible. I think out of all the British contingent, he's probably the one that got the most confidence of taking it, not just with this fight as a win, but taking it all the way to becoming a title holder. I think right now he gives me the most confidence. He's stirring up the excitement in my belly where I've got that gut feeling for him. A real absolute talent. I mean, and the whole team. I mean, Richard Shaw we've had on several times, haven't we? As we had Jack Shaw on as well. What great guys! What great team! And I think that's going to push them very, very far. In fact, so far, I think, like I said, I think he's going to go all the way to the top in UFC. I really, really do believe it. He's young, mature, head on young shoulders as well. Really makes good decisions, which is, I think, a real trait of need in those lighter weight divisions in UFC. You've got to be great decision maker. You can't make mistakes very often. And when you think he was competing with an injury and still performed as well as he did, I think that shows something about Jack Shaw that, is telling you that he's special.
Absolutely. And I think, I also think he doesn't get the credit that he deserves from the American audience. Maybe they haven't quite. I think his last fight, some people took notice, didn't they, of his wrestling and just the kind of ability from that side of things. But I actually think he's sort of going under the radar. And I do think that it's probably this year is the year where he's going to suddenly people are going to start taking notice. And then we got another recent previous guest, Corey McKenna is fighting Elise Reed in the women's strawweight. This is going to be the first time Corey has fought in the UK for a very long time. And of course, fans, etc. Like, this is a big fight for her.
Yes, it is, but it's something that she's totally capable of taking on. I know she's going to go out there and give her very, very best performance, and I think having a crowd there is going to do nothing more than give her that extra push. I think she'll respond very, very well to having a crowd on home soil. I think it'll push her on. I really do believe that.
And then we got Nathaniel Woods is fighting Ludwig. I'm not going to pronounce it. Sholninian, which is going to be again really big. It's a bit. I think that's a massive fight for Nathaniel Woods. I've got to say,
it is a big fight for Nathaniel Wood, but another kid that's just showing so much potential and always puts on a great performance. Nathaniel, it's been nice that I recently went down to his gym and watched him spar, moving around, and the kid's super sharp. Super sharp. One thing that I think his fighting style perhaps hasn't produced is more knockouts, because he does stand and trade an awful lot and put in a big work ethic on the feet. He throws out a lot of strikes, but perhaps just hasn't had quite as many clinical finishes as perhaps he potentially should have had when you have a look at the stats of how many strikes that he's throwing in each round. But I think he's got the potential to put this person away on the feet. He's just got again, we talk about making good decisions with Jack Shaw. He's got to make good decisions on the feet and just really assert himself early on, get ahead and stay ahead on the scorecard.
Indeed, my friend, indeed. So just before we bring in Ben to talk some boxing, I want to give a big shout out to manscaped.com for continually supporting us in the show. Excuse me as I cough my way through. Exciting news from our friends at Manscaped. They've just launched their 4th generation performance package. This ultimate package includes the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right. It's the 4.0. Manscaped, the leaders in male and female grooming, have done it again. And to make take your grooming game to the next level, you can join over 4 million men worldwide by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the code ACE Nation. You get 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Cannot talk enough about how good their products are. I've said it before and I do not tire of it. It's great stuff for both males and females. The trimmers, the equipment is top quality. And you can also get things like the Weed Whacker, which is an ear and nose hair trimmer, the crop preserver, the crop reviver toner, performance boxer briefs, which I've actually got on now. I will not show you people, but I've got them on now and they're super comfortable, made with great materials. And I know you've said they're good for things like sport and stuff like that.
Very much so.
And just cannot speak highly enough. So please do support us by supporting our partners at manscaped.com. Get 20% off by using the code ACE Nation. And of course, we thank them for continually sponsoring and supporting us, as we like it. We like it a lot. But I'm delighted to welcome back to the show Mr. Ben Doughty joins us. How are you, Ben?
I'm good. How's it going, Simon? Danny?
Let's just adjust that.
Yeah, Ben.
There you go. So, yes, Ben, how are you, mate? We had a week off last week, so which is unheard of.
Yeah, no, I'm all good, guys. Yeah, just always a pleasure to sort of chew the fat on the boxing beat on a Sunday evening.
Indeed. There's so I've been a bit out of it because I had COVID, so I've been a bit out of the loop in terms of everything which is going on. I did see that Dillian Whyte and Tyson Fury looks like it is actually happening. So I guess we'll start with that because it did look at one point like they might be having some sort of deal for Joshua and Dillian Whyte to step aside and there'd be a Usyk versus Fury. It didn't pan out that way, but from what you know, like how close did that come to happening, the Fury Usyk side of it?
It doesn't sound like it was terribly close, to be honest, Simon. I mean, Bob Arum said it was chaos. Bob Arum seemed a bit disoriented by the fact, because the thing about Saudi Arabia, and they've made this bid in the last 3 or 4 years to become a boxing superpower in terms of, as a host location. There's a lot of people who claim to know somebody. I mean, honestly, I've had literally, funny enough, the guy just phoned me a minute ago. I had a friend who a couple of years ago called me and said he had these people who had a direct link to one of the Saudi royal families. I believe it's a complex structure of meritocracy, autocracy. And he said, we can do this and we could nick ourselves $100,000 just as kind of, what they would call them, like conduits or, like brokers. And we were talking and got my mate Spencer Field involved. And I remember Eddie Hearn saying shortly after that, with Saudi Arabia, everybody knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. And it is a bit like that. And Aram said, this is chaos. Who are these people in the Middle East? But they were talking telephone numbers, and I'd love to see Fury versus Usyk more than any other heavyweight fight, I would think. But commercially, to the global public, whatever, I don't think it is as big a fight as Fury Joshua, was going to be, and probably still could be, depending if Joshua gets back on track. And I think the only reason it was ever going to happen is if it was just sponsored by silly Saudi money to the point where they just didn't care, and that included the step aside, the 15 million figure being bandied around to get Anthony Joshua to give up his rematch clause entitlement at this stage, and for Dillian Whyte to step aside for his He's been, I believe, he's been the WBC mandatory since about 1962, hasn't he?
Yes,
staying abreast of it.
say,
You know,
it's
so
been a while.
I never heard Dylan say one word about it, and Joshua was saying, you know, don't listen to all the bullshit unless I only listen to stuff if you hear it from me. I've not seen no contract. I've not signed no contract, and he said, which is a double negative, incidentally. It means he, you know, he hadn't. I don't need to go into that.
Yeah,
but so you know, I don't think they were ever particularly close to it, to be honest with you. I mean, I think Eddie Hearn was up for that plan. I mean, who wouldn't see the logic in getting paid 15 million not to fight, and then you get a shot at the winner? And you know what? If the guy that beat you gets knocked off by the other guy that you haven't fought, so you keep a bit of you can get your mystique back a little bit like that, because you'll be like, okay, he ain't there anymore, Usyk. So now my focus is on this guy who I've always been on a collision course with, and I've always said I would beat him. That would have been a lovely scenario, I think, for Anthony Joshua. But you know, it was never that simple. Eddie Hearn said it wasn't the 15 million that the tabloids were talking about, and you know, the next thing you heard finally. There was purse bid. Went to purse bids on, I think, Friday. I can't remember. I heard about it Friday or Saturday, but it went to purse bids Friday. Whyte versus Fury. Frank Warren won the purse bids, no doubt heavily backed by BT Sport and Top Rank, you know, and ESPN. He won it with a bid of £31 million or thereabouts. The purse split will be 80-20 in Fury's favour, which is something they're arguing about. But the thing is, Dylan, with a massive bid like that, somebody said to me today, it's the biggest purse bid ever. Don't get it. It's not the biggest purse ever, and it's not the biggest amount ever paid to stage a fight. But it's when things go to purse bids, it is supposedly the biggest amount ever tendered in a purse bid situation for the right to stage a fight. You know, so Dylan is looking at a decent chunk, regardless of it being 20%. And uniquely, what they've said this time, and I think this is quite a good idea, by the way, they've set aside the WBC, so they're going to set aside 10%. So Dylan and Tyson will split 80-20 of 90%, if that makes sense.
Yes.
The other 10% will go to the winner. They set that aside, which I think that's a lovely performance-related pay type scheme, you know, at the top level in boxing. So that's where we're at. I'm hearing today from my inside sources, of course, who don't want to be named, that it's April 23rd, Wembley, not Cardiff, not Friday the 29th at the Principality Stadium, which is probably unfortunate maybe for you, Simon. That was a bit more convenient, I imagine, location. I'm here in Wembley, 23rd of April, St. George's Day, lads.
Interesting. I think, I just when it was rumoured initially that Cardiff might be an option, I just didn't see it. I don't know why. I just didn't feel like it was a fit for whatever reason. Wembley feels like the right fit. I think. I still think out of all the heavyweight fights that could be done, the Fury Whyte fight is the one I'm least excited about. Which, you know, it is what it is, I suppose. But I think I've seen a lot of people kind of being quite disrespectful almost to the Dillian Whyte and saying, you know, he hasn't got a chance. But I think we were just talking about the some of the UFC which is coming up, and like the heavyweight bouts. With heavyweight combat sports, there's always a chance of an upset. And we've seen that, you know, in boxing in recent years with Anthony Joshua.
There's a chance of an upset in any weight division in boxing. I know people like that narrative that with two heavyweights in there, anything can happen, and you never know with heavyweights. But I just think it's happened with bantamweights, it's happened with junior welterweights. You know, the shocks do occur. People have this notion that heavyweights are more likely to knock each other out. Statistically, I'm not sure if that's true. It's one of those. For me, it's one of those cliches. But you could probably prove statistically that the heavyweight championship of the world, certainly the old school heavyweight championship of the world, when there was only one, has probably changed hands more by KO than the featherweight championship of the world. I think that probably would turn out to be true, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, I quite like the fight, to be honest with you, Simon. I think I can only see one winner. That's a strange thing, but I just think it's quite an interesting fight. I think the chemistry between the two of them in the build-up and actually in the ring, it's something I'm looking forward to seeing unfold. I've known Dylan Whyte, you know, I've known of him for years. I remember when he was still an amateur, and a few friends of mine, a friend of mine called Chris Oko, who was Commonwealth Cruiserweight champion back in the day, he told me he had this kid, this Jamaican lad, South London Jamaican lad, who was going to really do something. He was capable of really doing something. He just needed a bit of this and a bit of that. And because you know what happened with Dylan? He had 7 amateur fights, then he knocked someone out. He went to Sweden for some kind of international type meet, club international thing, and he knocked somebody out quite badly, who ended up in hospital. I think the guy was really touch and go, I believe. It was one of them. It was a serious injury and a scare. And they managed to prove that, or uncover that Dylan had professional kickboxing experience. So he wasn't an honest to goodness amateur boxer as far as they were concerned. And he was banned from amateur boxing because of that. That's why Dylan didn't get a chance. Initially, they were talking, the people I know who were looking to steer him were talking about maybe Olympics for Jamaica, all that kind of thing. And that whole plan changed when he got banned from amateur boxing, and that's why he turned pro when he did. And I've seen Dylan Whyte in the gym in like maybe 2009, 10, holding his own with Derek Chisora in sparring when he didn't have any pro fights at all. So I do find it interesting. I don't know what Dylan Whyte's actually got to win the fight with, but I just think it'll probably be a decent fight, and it'll be, I'm quite up for it. Certainly much more up for it than I would have been if Fury had have ended up fighting Robert Helenius, as was threatened at one point.
Yeah. Do you know, you have to bear with me. I've still got a bit of the COVID cough, which I can't avoid, unfortunately. There's been some talk with the MMA side of things as well, is that the UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou is out of contract. And one of the rumors is that there's people behind the scenes trying to set up a fight between him and Tyson Fury as the two kind of heavyweight champions of either. I do not see that happening, simply because I think to have two champions from the two sports clash, it almost, either side wouldn't want to win, wouldn't want to lose face as their top guys. I just can't see it. But I mean, have you heard anything from that side of things in terms of
only what you've heard? The headlines and Fury doing his typical trash talk about how he's going to knock that bum out as well, and everyone's a bum. For me, I don't know a whole lot about MMA and UFC and Ngannou in particular. But as far as I'm aware, whenever they've gone for one of these cross-combat circuses, it's never been real on the level. Right back to Muhammad Ali versus Tony Inoki, Antonio Inoki, in Japan back in 1976 when he fought that wrestler, and it was a really soporific farce. It turned out to be, but it wasn't real. Mayweather McGregor. I don't know that he carried him all that time, but it wasn't completely 100% real either, really. There was an element of showbiz, although there was a genuine stoppage and all the rest of it. I think, you look at other sideshows that Mayweather's got involved in, and he has another one coming up. I don't think they don't have that authenticity to them. He has not actually staged a boxing comeback. And I don't think, looking at Fury and Ngannou, two big, dangerous monsters like that in their own sphere, can you imagine them agreeing to fight each other in that unknown territory for both of them with those bases that loaded? I just don't think. I think you want more kind of protection and risk management than that in your life when you get to that level. So I don't see it. It was some kind of fuss.
I think the other side of it, like you're right, exactly right in what you say about all those different crossover fights. There's always that bit of protection or showbiz element to it. Going way back to the Inoki stuff, like you say. But also, I think the thing which people, if I'm going to be interested in a crossover fight like that, the only reason I'm interested is if, say, Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury are going to go at each other hell for leather, and we can genuinely see a good fight, like a proper fight between two heavyweight champions from different sports. And as soon as you get a feel that it's not real or is protected or there's any of that element to it, I think people switch off and it becomes a farce.
And I could think of one example of a real UFC cage fight between a boxer and a UFC or an MMA legend, and that was when James Toney fought. I say fought; he wasn't in there very long with Randy Couture. And that was only partial for the fact it was such a mismatch, because Tony obviously had no ground game and the other guy was aware of that. That's what he was going to do. And he just wrapped him up like a pretzel, in double quick time. And that was that, and it was rather ignominious kind of thing for James Toney, who I know I know that he thought he was just going to knock him out because I think boxers, world-class boxers and legendary boxers like James Toney, they put them tiny little gloves on and they think, are you kidding me? And they just think, what would I do to anybody with this on? And I think they forget about all that other stuff that Danny knows much more about than I do. And they think, hang on a second, like people think we're boxing when they think it looks easier from the outside than it actually is, right? So, so I don't have good associations with it. I either think of a farce with an arrangement, or I just think of an embarrassment for boxing. I think, you know what, there are boxers who've knocked out UFC guys and done well, but I'm trying to, they're not springing to my mind.
Butterbean did
he beat quite a few.
Yeah. Great. I was hoping for somebody slightly more credible than that, but he'll do. But I don't know. No, I don't. I mean, surely it's just talk. I mean, it's you know what, Simon? It's difficult enough getting the top heavyweights within the boxing contest in the world together in the same ring without me trying to speculate on the likelihood of something completely unprecedented. Which it seems unlikely.
I saw that Vitaly Klitschko, I think it was. I apologize if it was Vladimir. Said that Anthony Joshua should use his rematch with Usyk to kind of show that he's worthy of facing Tyson Fury, because I think the implication basically being that the kind of run or the form, whatever you'd say, of that Anthony Joshua's been in recent years isn't the same trajectory as Tyson Fury, who's obviously been on, he's beaten Wilder, etc.
His legacy has swelled and grown. Tyson Fury, Joshua, he's in this strange no man's land at the minute where he could be remembered. He could still be remembered as a kind of domestic great, perhaps, or maybe he'll be remembered as somebody who had a fall from grace, who was maybe slightly overrated, etc., etc. And I think that probably does drive Anthony Joshua because he has this uncertainty. He doesn't need money. He's not short of a few bob. So I think it's probably his sense of his place in history already, and his sense of himself and legacy is probably the big thing which is in Anthony Joshua's head and which drives him right now. You know.
Yeah, I'm interested. Like Danny, I'm interested in your view, like as a former fighter yourself, like Ben's just said that Anthony Joshua doesn't need the money, so inherently he doesn't need the hassle that comes along with media and social media and the constant rumors and questions and stuff like that. So if he is going to keep going, which by all accounts it seems he is, he's got to be doing it for the reasons that Ben's just sort of said. Like he's got to be looking at his legacy overall, surely.
Yeah. I think at the top of boxing, there's so much money involved in it. I can't imagine many of them are short of a few bob where that becomes a big concern. But I think fomenting a legacy, I think, becomes the next biggest thing after your finances are all set. I don't know. I think perhaps, Ben, you sort of rated him better than I perhaps rated him. I just feel like there's something's happened to his game where I don't know whether he can get himself back on track, and I can't put my finger on it, but I don't know. There's just a sparkle that's missing. I don't know what that sparkle is. It seems he's lost whatever it was that he was chasing. It doesn't seem to be there that he's chasing it anymore. I don't know what it is.
I think with Joshua, I think the vulnerabilities were always there waiting to be exposed, some of them, in terms of he probably doesn't hold a fantastic shot. Some guys have got granite jaws and some are regarded as being extremely susceptible to a shot, and others are just somewhere in between, and I think that's somewhere in between. If you hit him on the button, he will go, I think it's been proven. But at the same time, he does have, I know people were talking about the nature of his defeat to Andy Ruiz and saying it showed a kind of quitting mentality, but you remember the fight with Klitschko? He showed balls of steel in that, and a lot of presence of mind, and that kind of X factor, a hallmark of a champion to come back from that from the knockdowns and to do what he did when he was tired and he was taking shots and he was hurt, and he just had that kind of never say die kind of mentality in that fight. So. I think he's shown he can get back in the ring with the same guy who beat him up, and he can do a number on him with a different fight plan. So he came through that test. Obviously, I think it's going to be harder to do that against Usyk because Usyk is I don't know if he's a better heavyweight than Andy Ruiz on his day, because I think Andy Ruiz is capable of being very good on his day, but you have to fancy Usyk as just a more consummate professional, he's definitely a better fighter pound for pound than Andy Ruiz. And he probably is the better heavyweight because of his professional kind of mindset, which Andy Ruiz has proven he doesn't possess. God knows what's happened to Ruiz or if he's ever going to fight again. Do you know what I mean? It just seems he's a classic case of that one-hit wonder, flash in the pan. And then once he got the money, he kind of ate himself out of contention, But Joshua, I think his strengths were always he was a big puncher and he was a good, a marvellous athlete, and he was a good finisher too. He was a good combination puncher, Joshua. When he would have Cigar on the hook, he was very efficient at finishing them and throwing a hail of hurtful punches, which would get rid of a lot of guys up to a pretty good level. But I think when it comes to that real elite level, that Fury, the territory of people like Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, there needs to be the group. My friend Peter McDonough, who you could do worse and have on sometime or do my story with because he's a good talker. He always says Joshua is a manual and Usyk is an automatic. Do you know what I mean? In terms of some fighters have that adaptability. Joe Calzaghe had it to a great degree. Tyson Fury absolutely has it. Alexander Usyk has it. And to go with his phenomenal skills, he's not. Whereas Joshua, there's more the sense of this finely manufactured, honed machine. But when it short circuits, it short circuits in a big way, And I think Joshua does have ghosts in his mind. There are things that haunt his psyche. I think the nature of his defeats to Andrew Ruiz and to Alexander Usyk last time out, they've had a negative impact on his kind of confidence probably. And I think people were saying, in the Usyk fight, he looks like he doesn't know who he is anymore. He didn't look like whether he wanted to go and bully the guy and use his physical advantages and really try and get hold of him, or whether he was trying to go and box with the boxer. People said it looked like he was caught between two stools. And the corner of advice wasn't great either. I mean, obviously, what I want to know is who's going to be training Anthony Joshua going forward. Whenever they announce his Usyk rematch, assuming that's definitely going ahead, he's almost certainly hinted he'll have a different trainer and it won't be Robert McCracken anymore. And at some point, you'd expect there'll be an announcement who will be training him for it and how much of a difference can that make,
Yeah, that was going to be my next question because Chris Eubank Jr. actually said that Joshua should change. He needs new blood in his camp and he should change trainers and whatnot. Is it oversimplifying the issues that he's had to say he just needs a new trainer? And do you know what I mean? I just feel like
trainers are not miracle workers. Sure, certainly they're not. No. I mean, Angelo Dundee, who obviously one of the legends of the coaching realm, who worked with a whole host of great champions, but moreover, he worked with Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard and Michael Nunn, which is one hell of a kind of full house, of slick stylists. But he always said, "I'm only as good as the guy on the stool," because I think when you get a mystique like trainers like Angelo had. And other guys, even guys to a lesser degree, but guys like Adam Booth and certainly a guy like Manny Stewart, who the Kronk Maestro is no longer with us. I think people start to think that they are miracle workers and they will transform an ordinary product into something totally extraordinary, whereas I don't think it works that way, certainly not in boxing. And I imagine Danny would echo that it doesn't work that way in MMA and other combat sports either. But I suspect I think Robert McCracken is a good trainer. I've seen him in the gym. I don't like to comment too knowingly on trainers unless I've seen them working in the gym with a boxer. And obviously, most of them I'm not going to have seen just by law of mathematics. But I've seen a few, and I have seen Robert McCracken working with Carl Froch and other fighters over the years. When he used to be at the Real Fight Club, where over 10 years ago when I was based at that gym. And Robert, obviously, he's had a good, solid, world-class pro career himself. He's also had a lot of success with the amateur program as the GB coach. He's produced a lot of success for several major tournaments, including Olympiads for our British team. So there's no question that Rob McCracken is a good trainer. But what I think is perhaps they get to a point when a change is as good as a rest. And maybe they've gone as far as they can together. You can know an awful lot, but you still might have done everything you can do for a particular fighter. And he might get a new lease of life working with a different guy who brings some different ideas, a different energy, a different dynamic. And I think Joshua is definitely ready for that. But I think trainers are slightly overrated, Simon. To be honest with you, I think people think that they're capable. They're like sorcerers or something, or puppeteers. Yeah. When it's not. Mickey Duff used this he used this axiom for the he meant the manager, but you could substitute it for the trainer. He said when the bell rings, the manager goes backwards and the fighter goes forwards, and you could say that about the trainer too, of course, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you say, there's only so much they can do.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in it, I've got to say. Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano at Madison Square Garden in April. Is that the biggest fight from a female perspective that Katie Taylor and boxing generally could put on?
They're saying it is, and I think it probably is. But it's the first female main event at Madison Square Garden, so I think that's quite an argument for it having that kind of primacy historically. You know, I think it probably is in terms of the quality of the matchup and in terms of the billing and the fact that it is on MSG, the top liner. Yeah, and I think the purses, I'm not sure what they're getting paid, but I imagine the purses probably match that. I mean, what were the biggest female fights in history before it? There kind of aren't any, really. I mean, there was that kind of novelty thing between Layla Ali and Jackie Fraser-Lyde, who was Joe Fraser's daughter. I think she was like a half. You can't have a half daughter, can you? You've either got a daughter or not. I think there was some kind of. Was she a stepdaughter or something? I can't remember.
I'm not 100% sure.
She may have been a full daughter, but regardless of what she wasn't a great boxer, and she was probably a better lawyer. She worked in the legal profession, as I recall, and she was getting on a little bit, like 38 or something when it happened. Layla was a pretty decent boxer, although obviously she benefited from that surname and the looks similarity, you know, the kind of physical similarity to her dad. And also, but in case you wanted to mention, by the way, you got Nico Ali Walshoot box last night. You know, the grandson of Ali. He's coming up, but. I'm trying to think of a really big female fight before that, and I can't think of one. I mean, in the States, maybe there's a couple of that. Christy Martin was a big star back in the 90s. She was the first breakthrough female boxing star who was crashing those kind of pay-per-view cards with the likes of Mike Tyson on them, you know. But no, I think this probably is, in terms of a 50-50 anticipated fight, I think Katie versus Serrano is probably it. And I think what it is, I think women's boxing... She beat her
sister, didn't she?
She's second.
Katie Taylor beat her Amanda Serrano's sister, didn't she? Back in
to give it a bit more spice,
just to give it. So there's a bit of sort of aggro there, and I did see someone say, I'm trying to find. I was just trying to find the comment. Someone put that Katie Taylor will have to. This person said they think that Katie Taylor will have to finish her because it's in America, so she won't have that kind of favourable thing from the judges, which of course is something which boxing is almost plagued with. Yeah, I can think of the word plagued with, whereby you have the judges of the home country or whatever tend to favour those fighters. Is that probably factual? Does she need, Katie Taylor will probably need to?
I don't know, because Katie's had a squeeze in Madison Square Garden before, because I thought that Pursoon beat her on the Joshua Ruiz 1 undercard. I thought she got a bit of a squeeze then, although I know not everybody agrees with me, but a lot of people thought she lost that fight. She got it. Having said that, she could still have been seen as the A-side in that fight versus I think she's Belgian, Pursoon. It's different to fight in like an American-based Latin, isn't it? There's going to be more favouritism there. I imagine Serrano is probably a bit of a star across the pond, the way Katie is kind of a star to a degree over here. She's not usually famous in this country, but she's very famous in Ireland, and she's quite famous in mainstream Britain, ish. But I don't know about that. I mean, I think the judges obviously are supposed to be neutral for world title fights most of the time. I think it's in Las Vegas, they have to be Las Vegas judges. I think that's the only way they only have. Oh no, you know what? I don't think they have. No, not the judges. It's the referee. Has to be from the Nevada state to referee in Las Vegas. That's the way they do it. The judges are supposed to be neutral. What they usually try and do for you, although not always, but they might get one from your country, one from their opponent's country, and a neutral in between. Or sometimes they'll have 3 neutral judges. Obviously, if they don't, and suppose you've got 3 American judges all judging the Katie Taylor Serrano fight, that's for her team to appeal, ahead of time, and at rules meetings and stuff. And to say that we don't think, I mean, there's been some interesting cases before where people have objected to a judge. Like Marvin Hagler famously objected to Harry Gibbs judging his fight with Sugar Ray Leonard. He said he didn't want him because he was British and he might favour Sugar Ray's Fancy Dan kind of style, okay, because that whole idea that British cliche caricature about stand-up boxers, whatever. And in the end, he got Dave Moretti, Jojo Guerra, and Lou Filippo. Filippo scored for Hagler. Moretti and Guerra scored for Leonard. And I think he may have replaced Gibbs Guerra, and he scored it really wide for Leonard to the point where Hagler's side was saying he should have been in jail. Harry Gibbs, who watched the fight at home, scored it for Hagler, but obviously meaninglessly, just on paper, just for a hobby. And that was the big irony that you know if you'd have I think it would have been a travesty if Hagler had won that fight, and it really annoys me when anyone suggests that Hagler was robbed. But can you imagine if he hadn't have objected to the guy? In theory, he would have won the fight. Assuming Harry Gibbs didn't see it any different on TV to being ringside, then he ended up shooting himself in the foot. So I'm not convinced Casey can't win abroad. I mean, I know it's the first thing fans tend to say about these things, and it is a big problem, but I think it's more of a problem when you've got one A side and a really someone who's really shrunken B side in comparison. I think when you've got kind of a 50-50, like kind of two A sides a little bit like this, I don't think it's quite as difficult for them to get a decision. She's not just the away girl with no backup. She has leverage, and she has big team behind her, you know. Yeah,
I could see it. So Craig asked a question a while ago. For some reason, it didn't show up on my stream of questions, but I have just found it when I was flicking through for the Facebook page. So it said, Craig said, who do you think is going to win the big fight in Cardiff next weekend?
I fancy Eubank. I think Williams is a decent fighter. He's rough and tough. He's been training at my mate's gym, the boxing booth, because he's trained to Adam Booth. The gym is named after Adam Booth, but my friend Mick Guilfoyle is based there with his opposite number, Adam Martin. They train fighters together, and it's very much as much their base as it is Adam Booth's. And so they've been seeing lots of Liam Williams, and he's been sparring with one of their fighters, who's a guy called Jermaine Brown, who's got an English title fight on the undercard of Khan Brook on February the 19th. And they're saying that he's very, very rough. And, he said Liam Williams in sparring, he'll knock you, he'll elbow you. And it's, they said it's been a bit of a baptism of fire for their fighter, learning about all the rough stuff. But I think Eubank is the more talented, better fighter, more athletic. And I think Eubank is, if the kind of fight that Williams will intend to have with him, I think it might suit Eubank. I think Eubank suffers when you box him. I think you look at what George Groves did. I know it was a while ago now, but you look at what George Groves did to Eubank. He kind of exposed him as a relative novice at that level. I think a tear-up, Eubank's okay with that. And I think he's just arguably the harder puncher, the faster guy. They both got a great engine. I think Eubank is that little bit better, but I wouldn't be astonished if Williams won.
Do you think that the crowd could be a contributing factor? Obviously, as in Wales, Liam Williams, it's going to have big support there. It's going to be an atmosphere. It's always a good atmosphere in Cardiff anyway. So I am interested in if that could spur. At the end of the day,
I always remember Steve Robinson versus Nassim Hamed at Cardiff Arms Park, and they thought the crowd might bother Hamed, and being outnumbered. And I just remember what the square root of sod all difference it made. I mean, obviously that was because there was more of a class gap than there is between these two fighters we're talking about. But what was funny, I thought, because Eubank is a character too, because of that franchise that his father started, and so he has some of that energy. And I remember Nassim Hamed dancing to the ring the way he did, flamboyantly in the leopard print robe. And there was actually a lot of people jumping up and down and dancing and everything, pissed up, Cardiff residents and whatnot, in theory, Steve Robinson supporters, you'd think. And I remember Ian Dark saying that the reception is not quite as hostile as I thought it would be, Glenn. And Glenn McCoy said, well, you know what? A lot of people like this sort of thing. And I think that might apply to Eubank as well, to a lesser degree. So I don't think the crowd will bother Chris Eubank Jr. Unduly. It might give Williams a lift, but I just think it's a good fight. It's a 50-50 fight. It's an interesting fight because I think they're both that little bit below true world class. Williams did really well, gave a very good account of himself against Demetrius Andrade when it looked like he was getting stopped early, and he gutted it out and pushed him all the way, But I think this is a good domestic fight. I fancy Eubank to win a stoppage at some point. I think it might be a war. I don't think it'll be a boring fight by any stretch. I think it might be a war of attrition, and I would fancy Eubank maybe in like 8 or 9 rounds.
Interesting. Looking forward to it. Okay, so I'm gonna call it an evening, a show there. But obviously we've got lots of big boxing and UFC cards coming up over the next few weeks. I've got to reschedule a couple of interviews with some boxers and fighters, which I had lined up pre-COVID. So hopefully I'll have them out very soon. But you can find Ben on Instagram. He's done a couple of interviews himself recently. I saw one you put up yesterday, Ben, didn't you?
Yeah, that was
you did.
That was fantastic for me because it was Michael Nunn. Michael second to Nunn, as he was known, was out of Davenport, Iowa, but boxed out of California in the late 80s and the 90s, and he was just a phenomenal. He was supposed to be the new Sugar Ray Leonard. That was the billing he had behind him, and he did achieve an awful lot. He was IBF middleweight champion of the world. He was WBA super middleweight champion, and he was a hell of a fighter. But he didn't fulfill the amazing potential he had, and people expected him to do a bit more than he did. In the end, he got nicked in a kind of entrapment kind of sting. To do with something to do with intent to supply drugs and all the rest of it, but he was buying drugs from an undercover police officer. But he got this crazy long sentence of 24 years for like a kilo of coke. It was all very shady, and he ended up serving about 17 years of that. He went away 2003. I think it came out 2020 at some point, and it was always. I've got 4 favourite fighters in the world emotionally: that Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, Hector Camacho, and Michael Nunn. And I said to my friend Iceman John Scully, who's a mover and a shaker in a boxing business, who actually fought Michael Nunn. And I said to him, you know what, I'd love to do an interview one day. And I didn't expect much to come of it. And he just said, I'll reach out to him today. And in the end, it took a week long of inboxing back and forth and trying to work out the times and him asking, was there any money? Was I getting any proceeds? All the rest of it. But in the end, he just said, oh, listen, okay. I must have flattered him enough. And he just said, oh, listen, just call me tomorrow at such and such a time. And yeah, we just did it on FaceTime, and I filmed a FaceTime of just put a camera behind the one that we were on, and went with it. But for me, that was it was like a boyhood hero, teenage kind of hero of mine. Fantastic. Yeah,
they've been some of my favorite interviews as things have worked out. Is like the people who you looked up to, you followed their careers and things like that. They're the ones which you can really dig deep into. But yeah, it's enjoyable. I'm going to check that out actually. But excuse me again, coughing. As always, Danny, it's been a pleasure. I know we haven't heard much from you in the last 15 minutes or so, but that's
man, it's great to be a part of it and just listen in. It's great, I'm continuing to learn about the boxing. When I hear Ben talk, as you know, we're always jaw dropped at his knowledge, dates, names. It bewilders me every single time. I sit here and listen and becoming a bigger fan of not only boxing but of just listening to Ben Doughty talk. It's great. I'm never sat here bored.
That's it. Wicked. That's the way. Guys, we'll be back next Sunday. We've got a couple of shows on Patreon this week. We've got the Roderick Gig show Thursday. My story with ex-Premier League defender Darren Pearce will be out this week as well. So keep an eye on social media and all that good stuff. But until then, please do check out Manscaped and, of course, ExpressVPN for all your needs, whether it's grooming or VPNs for your internet privacy. Check them out. Get yourself some nice discounts, as they say. But we'll see you next week. I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers, guys.
Bye, guys.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.